Hello everyone. Thus far in the Python for Beginners course, you have been looking at simple, sequential programs and operators used to write them. But let's try and make our programs a bit more intelligent and exciting with conditional execution. This is a standard color coding we'll be using throughout the presentation. Here, we will learn how to make our program make decisions. In our very basic Hello World program, the program would simply greet us with a simple greeting. But what if we wanted to make the program a bit more intelligent? What if we wanted the program to greet us according to the time of the day? Good morning before 12 o'clock and good afternoon after 12 o'clock. Here's how we can code that. As you can see, we have an if statement and it is very intuitive. For this example, I have set a variable called time to 10. Assume it's a 24-hour clock. The word if is a keyword in Python, and this keyword is followed by a logical expression that returns either true or false. Also note the colons at the end of these statements. You can see the use of comparison operators here. In this line, the less than operator checks if the time is less than 12. If it is, it returns true. If it is not, it returns false. Notice also these leading spaces. Unlike many other programming languages, leading spaces like these carry syntactical meaning in Python. You can use a tab or spaces to make this indentation. These white spaces are used to mark the scope in Python. What this indentation means is that this block of code will be executed only if this if statement returns true. In this case, time is less than 12. Therefore, this block will be executed. With the second if statement, the program checks again to see if time has passed 12. Since this returns false, this block of code will not be executed. The last line will be executed regardless of the time since it is not under a condition. If instead our time was set to be 14, which would mean it's 2 p.m. in the afternoon, the first if statement returns false, and the code indented under the second if statement will be executed since the second if evaluates to true. Else is another keyword in Python. If you need your program to decide between two things, we can use an if and an else like this. The else evaluates to true only if the if statement evaluates to false. As you saw earlier, else is not compulsory. Elif is a similar keyword. This word is a combination of the two words else and if, and remembering it as an else if might actually help you understand the function. Elifs are used to create multi-way if statements. When the code is executed, it first checks the first if, and if it evaluates to true, we skip all the rest. Else if it evaluates to false, we go on to check the elif that follows. And if this evaluates to true, we don't check the elifs or the else that follow. So how is this any different from the code here? In this code, the first if condition is evaluated, and if it returns true, the code indented will be executed. But then, regardless of whether the first if condition returned true or false, the program will check the next if statement. Functionally, in this example, they return the same output since the marks are broken into intervals that don't overlap. But let's look at a program where the output differs. Check out the two pieces of code provided here. Note that for a given integer value for x, multiple independent statements may return true, unlike in the previous example. Take a moment to figure out what the output would be for the two cases. Here we go. I hope you got it right. In the first case, since the first if returns false, we go and check the first elif, and since it returns true, it does not check any further. But in the second case, even after the first if returns false and the second if returns true, and we print over 5, the program goes on to check the other statements too. In today's lesson, we checked out several options we can choose from to implement conditional execution. Which of these structures you choose to use is totally up to you. Which construct is most suitable for use depends on the problem and the solution you are designing. Often in programming, it is useful to visualize your solution before you actually start coding. Here is how you can visualize each of these blocks. I will briefly walk you through the diagrams, but make sure to pause the video and try to relate these diagrams to the actual code we saw earlier. First, the simple if statement. The program checks if a certain condition is met. And if the condition is met, it takes certain actions and then continues with the rest of the program. But if the condition is not met, which would mean if the condition returned false, we do nothing and simply continue with the rest of the program. Now take a look at the visualization of the if-else block. Just like the first if statement, we check to see if the condition is met, and if it returns true, we execute a block of code. But notice what happens if the condition returns false. We do that only if the condition returns false. Notice the difference between the two if constructs, the basic if and the if-else. While we only use the one side of the condition with just the if statement, we use both paths when we use an else. The third diagram visualizes a block with an if, elif, and an else statement. Notice how when the first if statement or any of the subsequent elif statements return true, we do not check the following elif statements. If the first condition returned true, we ignore all the elifs that follow. Else if the first condition returns false, only then will we check the next elif. See why I said it's easier to remember the function of an elif if you remember it as an else if, and the same goes for this elif. Though for this visualization purpose, we have used only one elif, there can be multiple elifs following. The next elif in line is only checked if this elif returns false. And finally, if the if statement and all the elif statements return false, the code under the else statements will be executed. With that, we come to the end of the lesson on conditional execution. In the next lesson, you will learn about collections. Happy learning ahead.